It was a cold winter morning. Mark woke up in his tiny, messy apartment. The alarm clock blared next to his bed, but he lazily reached out to turn it off, squeezing his eyes shut for a few more moments. A faint light filtered through the worn-out curtains, but the room remained dim and lifeless, not just because of the lighting, but because of the heavy, suffocating atmosphere inside. Mark lived alone, surrounded by clutter. Empty beer cans littered the table, piles of paperwork were scattered across the floor, and an overwhelming sense of stagnation hung in the air. His job as a salesman at a company he despised drained him daily. Each morning, he dragged himself out of bed, went to work, sat at his desk, pretending to be busy, and counted the hours until he could leave. He hadn't always been like this. In his younger years, Mark had dreams of becoming an entrepreneur, someone who made a difference. But life had other plans. Failed business attempts, family pressure, and a painful breakup with his longtime girlfriend had left him feeling stuck in a cycle of disappointment. That morning, as he stood in front of the bathroom mirror, he stared at his own exhausted reflection. His eyes were dull, his face unshaven, his expression empty. "How did I end up like this?" he muttered. But instead of searching for an answer, he simply sighed and got ready for another day of routine misery. Later that day, while Mark was drinking coffee at his usual spot, his best friend Joe walked in with a knowing smirk. "I have something for you," Joe said, sliding a wooden box across the table. Mark frowned and opened it. Inside was an old mirror with an intricately carved frame. At the top, a strange inscription read, "Look into this mirror, and you will see your greatest enemy." "What is this?" Mark scoffed. Joe simply shrugged. "Just try looking into it. You never know. It might help." Mark chuckled, but took the mirror home anyway. He leaned it against the wall in his bedroom, paying little attention to it. After all, it's just a mirror, right? That night, Mark lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind tangled in restless thoughts. Why is my life such a mess? Why am I stuck like this? His eyes wandered toward the mirror. At first, he saw nothing unusual. It was just his reflection, the same tired face he had seen for years. But then, something changed. His reflection's eyes sharpened. His lips moved, even though Mark hadn't spoken. A deep, unfamiliar voice echoed through the room. "Do you know why your life is in ruins?" Mark jolted upright, his heartbeat racing. "What the hell?" "Because of you." A chill ran down his spine. "You blame everything, your job, your circumstances, other people, but you have never looked at yourself. You are the only one who has control over your life. If you want change, stop complaining and start acting." Mark's breath caught in his throat. His instinct was to deny it, to argue, to say, "It's not my fault." But deep down, another voice inside him whispered, "What if it's true?" Before he could respond, the mirror returned to normal. The room was silent again, except for the faint ticking of the clock. Mark sat there, stunned, unaware that this moment would change his life forever. The next morning, something inside Mark had shifted. He woke up earlier than usual, feeling an unfamiliar sense of urgency. For the first time in years, he took a hard look at his life. If I truly have control, what do I need to do? He grabbed a notepad and wrote down a list. Check, learn a new skill. Find a job that excites me. Get physically and mentally stronger. Stop blaming. Start taking responsibility. Day by day, he committed to small but meaningful actions. He started reading books on self-improvement, enrolled in a public speaking course, exercised every morning, and, most importantly, he actively looked for a new job. 3 months later, Mark received an interview invitation from a company he had always admired. 6 months later, he had a new job, better pay, and a renewed sense of purpose. A year later, he looked at his life and realized he was no longer the man he used to be. One night, Mark stood before the mirror again. He gazed into his own eyes and waited. But this time, there was no voice, no whisper of doubt, no scolding remarks. Just him, stronger, more confident, in control of his own destiny. For the first time in years, Mark smiled at his reflection, because now he understood. His greatest enemy had always been himself. But he was also the only one who could change his life.